The road to Harlan. Julian Whitaker, a retired investor in his late 70s, sat alone inside his sleek silver BMW on the shoulder of a narrow Kentucky road. The relentless summer heat clung to the countryside like a wet blanket, and though the car's air conditioning hummed steadily, it did little to ease his growing discomfort. He tapped his thumb against the leather steering wheel, eyes flitting to the digital clock on the dashboard. He had places to be, or at least, that's what he told himself. He wasn't used to this kind of disruption. For most of his life, things had gone his way. He'd built a financial empire from the ground up, the kind people toasted over crystal glasses and wrote about in business journals. He lived in a sprawling mansion outside Lexington, where silence and control reigned. But today, life had thrown him a curveball, a flat tire, far from any reliable cell signal, with roadside assistance nowhere in sight. After trying 3 times to get a signal without success, Julian exhaled slowly and leaned back in his seat. A hint of frustration coiled in his gut. That was when he saw someone approaching. A kid, maybe 13 or 14, walking down the roadside with a steady pace, wearing a faded green t-shirt, jeans with worn knees, and a pair of shoes that had clearly lived several lives already. The boy slowed as he reached the car, eyeing the flat tire with a glance that spoke of familiarity. "You've got a flat, sir?" he asked, his voice calm, respectful. Julian blinked, momentarily thrown off by the boy's confidence. "Yes, I was trying to call for help, but this place seems to be a black hole for self-service." "I can help you with that," the boy said without hesitation, already kneeling beside the wheel. "My granddad showed me how to fix one last summer. You got a spare?" Julian gestured toward the trunk. The boy opened it, found the tools, and got to work. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, just quiet precision. Julian watched in silence, feeling an emotion he didn't often entertain: humility. The boy's movements were purposeful, not rushed, as if he respected the task more than the person he was helping. When the tire was changed and the tools packed away, the boy stood and wiped his hands on his jeans. "All done," he said with a small, satisfied smile. Julian reached for his wallet, pulling out a few crisp bills. "Here, let me give you something for your time." But the boy stepped back and raised his hand. "No need, sir. Just happy to help." Julian was left holding the money, speechless, as the boy turned and walked away without another word. For several minutes, Julian sat still in his car, watching the boy's figure disappear down the dusty road through his rearview mirror. Something about the encounter lingered: his composure, his integrity, the refusal to accept anything in return. That evening, Julian sat in the quiet of his study, surrounded by things that usually brought him comfort: rare books, expensive scotch, and the ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. Yet none of it seemed to fill the strange sense of incompletion that had settled over him. He had met thousands of people in his lifetime, across conference tables and private jet lounges. But none had moved him quite like that boy. The next morning, Julian woke with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He needed to find the boy, not to repay him, but to understand him. Who was he? Where did that kind of character come from? Julian drove the same stretch of road, stopping at every gas station and roadside cafe along the way. He described the boy to anyone who would listen. Most shook their heads until finally, an older woman behind the counter at a roadside diner said, "Sounds like you met Leo. He lives in Harlan with his mama. Sweet kid, always helping out." "Harlan," Julian repeated. It was an hour's drive into the Appalachian foothills. He remembered the name from childhood maps, but had never been. The drive was scenic: rolling hills, green hollows, sunlit woods, but Julian barely noticed. His thoughts were fixed on Leo. Harlan was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes with peace, but the kind that lingers from hard years. Julian asked around and was eventually directed to a small house on the town's edge. The house was old, but kept. The front porch sagged slightly, and a wind chime made of rusted spoons sang in the breeze. Julian hesitated before knocking. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 40s. Her auburn hair was pulled back, and her expression was wary but kind. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Good morning," Julian began, clearing his throat. "I believe I met your son yesterday, Leo. He helped me with a flat tire. Wouldn't take a dime for it." She softened immediately. "That's Leo, all right. He's out back fixing the fence. You're welcome to wait." Julian stepped inside. The house was humble: old furniture, Mismatched chairs, but everything was clean and warm. Family pictures lined the walls. A few drawings, clearly Leo's, were taped to the fridge. Julian couldn't remember the last time his own home felt this lived in. They stepped out to the backyard. Leo was hammering a wooden slat into place. When he looked up and saw Julian, he gave a grin. "Hey, mister. Didn't expect to see you again." Julian returned the smile. "I couldn't stop thinking about what you did yesterday. I just wanted to say thank you." Again, Leo wiped his hands. "It wasn't a big deal. To you, maybe," Julian said. "But to me, it meant something." They stood for a moment in silence. The yard behind Leo was patched with dry grass and broken toys. The swing set was rusted. But everything about the boy's posture, his pride, his calm, spoke of strength. "You've got a good head on your shoulders," Julian said. "Your mother must be proud." Leo shrugged. "She works hard. I try to help where I can." Julian nodded. Something had shifted inside him. "I'd like to do something for you. For both of you." "We're okay," Leo replied quietly. "We've managed fine." "This isn't about need," Julian said. "It's about thanks." Before Leo could respond, his mother called from the porch. "Leo, wash up. Lunch is almost ready." Then she looked at Julian. "Would you care to join us? It's just stew and bread." Julian was caught off guard, but nodded. "I'd like that." The kitchen smelled of roasted vegetables and something freshly baked. The table was small, the bowls chipped, but everything was set with care. Julian, in his pressed linen shirt and tailored pants, felt oddly out of place, but welcomed. As they ate, Leo talked about school, about his love for machines and building things. His mother shared stories of the town, the people who looked out for one another. Julian listened, really listened. He saw now that this boy and this woman had something that all his wealth had never bought: connection, resilience, honesty. When the meal ended and Julian stood to leave, he turned to her. "You've raised an extraordinary young man." "Thank you," she said. "We've had our share of hard times. But Leo's always had a good heart." Julian left with a quiet determination. This wasn't about charity. It was about honoring something real. Leo reminded him of himself, before the suits and stock tickers, back when values weren't listed on a ledger. The next day, Julian made calls. Lots of them. Contractors, suppliers, architects. Within the week, trucks began arriving at the modest house in Harlan. At first, Leo's mother was overwhelmed. "You didn't have to." Julian interrupted her. "You gave me something I didn't know I needed. Let me do this." Over the next several weeks, the house was transformed. The porch was rebuilt, the leaky roof replaced. The swing set out back was torn down and a new one installed. Inside, the kitchen was redone, the bathroom modernized. Fresh paint, new floors. Leo tried to help, of course, but Julian insisted he let others handle it. "Your job is to enjoy being a kid." Still, Leo couldn't stay away. He watched the workers, asking questions, soaking up every detail. One of the crew took a liking to him and let him help measure beams and mix paint. Julian watched with pride. It was like watching a spark catch fire. One evening, the three of them sat on the new porch, watching the sun dip low over the hills. Leo's mother turned to Julian, tears in her eyes. "You didn't just fix our house. You gave us something we didn't think we'd ever feel again: hope." Julian smiled. "You gave that to me first." When the final day came, it felt like a neighborhood celebration. Friends stopped by. A local baker brought pies. Someone else brought lemonade. Leo turned to Julian and said, "I think I want to build houses when I grow up. Or maybe help fix things for people who can't." Julian placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're already doing that, Leo. You just keep being you." As the day faded to dusk, Julian knew this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning for Leo, for his mother, and for himself. In giving, he had received more than he ever expected. And somewhere along a forgotten stretch of Kentucky road, an old man found something far more valuable than money: purpose, connection, and a second chance to do something right.